My entire life. My parents treated me like I was invisible. Whenever relatives visited, they proudly talked about my brother Mark. His promotions. His expensive car. His perfect life. But when someone asked about me, my father would shrug and say, "Oh, she's still trying to figure things out." What they didn't know was that the small cafe I started 5 years ago had quietly grown into a chain of restaurants across the city. And the day they discovered the truth was the day they realized the family failure owned the building they lived in. I grew up in a house where love had conditions. If you succeeded, you were praised. If you struggled, you were ignored. My brother Mark was the golden child. From the moment he learned to walk, my parents treated him like a future legend. When he scored well in school, my mother baked cakes. When he got into university, my father told everyone at work. But when I graduated college, my parents simply said, "That's nice." No celebration. No pride. Just silence. The moment that changed everything happened at a family dinner. Relatives had gathered to celebrate Mark's promotion at a big company. Everyone was praising him. Then my aunt asked, "So what about Sarah? What is she doing these days?" The room went quiet. My father laughed awkwardly. "She works at a small cafe. Nothing serious." Everyone nodded politely. But inside me, something broke. Because that cafe was mine. But they never cared enough to ask. 5 years earlier, I had used my savings to open a tiny coffee shop. The place was small. Only 4 tables. But I worked day and night. I studied business online. I experimented with recipes. Slowly, customers started coming. Then more. Then more. Within 3 years, I opened a second location. Then a third. But I never told my family. Because they never asked. Meanwhile, Mark's life looked perfect. He wore expensive suits. He posted photos of luxury restaurants. My parents adored him even more. Every time I visited home, my mother would say, "You should learn from your brother." I always smiled politely. Because if they knew the truth, their entire world would flip upside down. One evening my parents called me urgently. Their voices sounded stressed. My father explained that Mark had convinced them to invest in a business opportunity. They had used their house as collateral. But the investment failed. Now the bank was threatening to take their home. They were desperate. My mother said softly, "Sarah, do you know anyone who could help us?" I stared at my phone for a long time. Because the bank they were talking about was financing my restaurants. A few days later we met at the bank. My parents looked nervous. Mark looked irritated. He clearly blamed everyone except himself. The bank manager entered the room. He greeted everyone politely. Then he looked at me and smiled warmly. "Miss Sarah Carter, thank you for coming." My parents looked confused. The manager continued, "Since you are the primary investor for this property loan." My father interrupted. "Investor? What do you mean?" The manager turned to them calmly. "Your daughter owns several businesses that fund this building's mortgage." The room fell silent. My father stared at me like he had never seen me before. Mark laughed nervously. "This must be a misunderstanding." But the manager shook his head. "No misunderstanding. Sarah Carter owns Carter Cafe Group." My father whispered, "You own that company?" I nodded. For the first time in my life, everyone in the room was listening to me. I explained how the cafe grew, how the brand expanded, how investors joined, and how the business now generated millions in revenue. My parents sat there in stunned silence. The daughter they ignored had quietly built an empire. Then the bank manager asked me something important. Do you want to take ownership of the house to recover the loan? Technically, I could. My parents' house could legally become mine. Everyone waited for my answer. Mark looked terrified. My parents looked ashamed. And in that moment, I finally understood something. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about making them realize the truth. I looked at the bank manager and said calmly, "Transfer the loan to my account." Everyone gasped. My father whispered, "You're saving the house." I nodded. But then I added something they would never forget. "Not because you believed in me." I paused. But because I believed in myself. After that day, my parents treated me differently. Not with pity. Not with silence. But with respect. And Mark, for the first time in his life, he stopped pretending he was better than everyone. Because the daughter they once called the family failure had quietly become the strongest person in the room.